Welcome my channel, Brilliant Minds. Today, the story of Emma Reyes, a genius game developer who fights back when her family steals her work. A story of courage, power, and claiming what's yours. The ballroom shimmered under cascading lights, the glass walls offering a panoramic view of Los Angeles glowing against the night sky. Industry titans, investors, developers, and influencers in sharp suits and glittering gowns mingled over champagne, toasting the miraculous turnaround of Reyes Interactive, a once struggling gaming giant now on the verge of a historic $200 million deal. All thanks to the revolutionary AI gaming engine that had taken the market by storm. Emma Reyes stood near the back, nursing a glass of champagne she barely sipped, her dark green evening dress feeling like a costume she wasn't sure she wanted to wear. This was supposed to be her moment, the night her work was finally recognized. She had poured 2 years of her life into developing the AI engine that made this comeback possible. Working countless sleepless nights, often in secret, after years of being dismissed as the quirky coder by her family. But as her father, Victor Reyes, took the stage, all polished charisma and perfectly tailored confidence, Emma's chest tightened. "Ladies and gentlemen," Victor began, his voice carrying effortlessly over the crowded room. "Tonight, we celebrate not just the survival, but the rebirth of Reyes Interactive, a rebirth made possible by leadership, vision, and relentless creativity." Emma straightened slightly, holding her breath, waiting for her name, but it didn't come. Instead, Victor gestured grandly to Lucas Reyes, Emma's older brother, who was lounging near the stage, every bit the confident executive in his designer suit. "This man right here," Victor continued, "our chief creative officer, led the charge. His vision for an AI-driven gaming platform positioned us for the future. Lucas, come on up here." A roar of applause erupted. Emma's fingers tightened around her champagne flute as she watched Lucas swagger to the stage, accepting a handshake from their father and standing before the microphone, grinning like a man who had conquered the world. "This has been an incredible journey," Lucas began, oozing charm. "When I first imagined what an adaptive gaming engine could do for immersive player experiences, I knew we had to take the leap. And thanks to our amazing team, and, of course, the guidance of my father, we did it." Emma's heart pounded, heat rushing to her face. Imagined, he hadn't even understood her early designs when she'd tried to explain them. He'd brushed her off, called it tech babble. Now, he was standing there, claiming every ounce of credit. The applause swelled as Victor took the mic back. "And with that kind of leadership," he said, turning to Lucas with pride, "it's only fitting that we recognize his contribution in a more tangible way." Victor motioned to an assistant, who stepped forward with a ceremonial check for $2 million, labeled Innovation Bonus. Emma felt like the floor had fallen away. She had spent nearly 2 years building that AI system, not just as a side project, but as the core innovation that had rescued the company from bankruptcy. And now, as her family stood on stage reaping the rewards, no one even said her name. "To the future of Reyes Interactive," Victor called, raising his glass, prompting a room-wide toast. Emma forced herself to raise her own glass, plastering on a polite smile as her insides twisted. Around her, investors and developers turned to her and murmured congratulations, the knowing kind, as if they were aware who had done the real work but were too polite or too strategic to say it aloud. As Lucas and Victor soaked in the applause, Emma's eyes narrowed slightly. They could have had her loyalty. But tonight, as she swallowed the bitter taste of betrayal, something much colder and sharper crystallized inside her: resolve. Because while they were busy celebrating, none of them knew that the AI engine everyone was applauding still legally belonged to her, and tomorrow, she would remind them. Long before the glittering gala and the thunderous applause for Lucas, there were quiet nights filled with nothing but the glow of Emma's computer screen and the rhythmic tapping of keys. She could still remember the first day she stepped back into Reyes Interactive's sleek offices, returning from a prestigious AI research fellowship, armed with a PhD in machine learning and a deep hope that her skills would finally be recognized by her family. But instead of being greeted with excitement or even curiosity, she was assigned to IT support, a polite way of saying, "Stay in the basement and don't touch anything important." Victor Reyes, Her father and the legendary founder of the studio had barely looked up from his endless meetings when she returned. "We build worlds, Emma, not algorithms," he had said dismissively, and Lucas, always the golden boy, had given her a patronizing grin. "Not everything can be solved with code, sis," he had quipped, already polished in the art of public relations and high-profile deal-making. But Emma knew what they didn't. The industry was changing. And fast. Players were demanding more immersive, more responsive game worlds, ones that adapted to player decisions, learned from them, and created narratives that were never the same twice. The static storylines and repetitive AI behaviors that had once made Reyes Interactive famous were now making it irrelevant in a world moving toward dynamic experiences. And as the company's revenues shrank, losing players to smarter, more innovative competitors, Emma quietly began working on a solution no one asked her to create. Every night, after enduring another day of fixing network issues or debugging aging game builds, Emma went home and opened her laptop, pouring herself into a secret project she named Ether, an AI-driven gaming platform designed to revolutionize interactive storytelling. Ether would use deep learning to adapt characters, dialogue, and plot lines in real time, creating a game experience unique to every player. Something no studio, not even the tech giants, had fully achieved. She sketched out neural network models, designed procedural narrative generators, and trained AI agents using her own datasets when company servers weren't available. There were times when the exhaustion nearly broke her, working 16-hour days, subsisting on takeout, and trying to convince herself it wasn't foolish to think she could change a company that had already decided she didn't belong. But every time she thought about quitting, she remembered the way Victor and Lucas talked about her, as if she were just a background player in her own family's story. That anger, that burning sense of injustice, pushed her forward when nothing else could. 6 months into her secret development, the company's largest project, a big-budget RPG, failed spectacularly. Riddled with outdated mechanics and boring NPCs, players abandoned it, and reviewers shredded it. Investors started pulling out, and layoffs were announced. Emma watched as Victor and Lucas scrambled for solutions, never once thinking to ask her if she had ideas. It was only after their biggest investor threatened to withdraw funding altogether that Emma took a risk. She requested a private meeting with Victor and Lucas, bringing a prototype of Ether to show them what she had been working on. She could still see the way Victor leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, skeptical before she had even begun. Lucas, half smiling, clearly amused that little Emma wanted to show them something important. But when she booted up the demo and Ether sprang to life, generating a game scenario in real time, adjusting to player behavior on the fly, with emotionally intelligent dialogue and unscripted plot twists, the smirk on Lucas's face faded. Even Victor sat forward, eyes narrowing, studying the screen. "You built this?" Victor asked finally, disbelief in his voice. Emma nodded, her throat dry. "Yes, alone. It's what our games need to survive." There was a long silence. Then Victor gave a noncommittal grunt. "Interesting." Lucas, ever the opportunist, leaned in with a calculating glint in his eye. "We could work with this. Package it right, and the market will eat it up." Emma had hoped they would finally see her value, that this would be the moment she earned her place at the table. But instead, her father ended the meeting with a vague promise to think about it. And Lucas clapped her on the shoulder like she was a junior developer who'd done good work for the bosses. Weeks passed, and Emma watched in quiet disbelief as Lucas began presenting Ether to investors as his vision for Reyes Interactive's future. In internal meetings, he called it his project. And Victor let him, focusing on how this would save the company and ignoring Emma entirely. No mention of her name. No credit. No seat at the planning meetings. Still, Emma stayed silent, trying to convince herself that at least the company would survive. That maybe they would realize the truth once success came. But when Victor and Lucas publicly unveiled Ether under a new name, Project Nexus, with Lucas as the creative visionary behind it, Emma knew the truth. They had no intention of ever giving her credit. And now, standing in the ballroom where Lucas was being rewarded for his genius, Emma realized she had let them take her work for too long. What they didn't know, what neither Victor nor Lucas had ever bothered to check, was that every line of Ether's code, every innovation, was copyrighted in her name, with development logs proving her sole authorship. And none of it legally belonged to Reyes Interactive. She had given them a chance to do the right thing. They chose to take advantage instead. That was fine, because now Emma was done waiting. The morning after the gala dawned gray and cold, a sharp contrast to the glitter and warmth of last night's celebration, or betrayal. As Emma now thought of it, she arrived at Reyes Interactive headquarters earlier than usual, needing to clear her head before facing her family. The walls of the sleek, glass-paneled building felt more like a fortress than ever. And as she swiped her badge and stepped inside, the lobby's hum of activity felt oddly distant. The AI development lab, tucked away on the lower floor, had always been her sanctuary, the one place in the company where she felt in control, where her mind could roam free among lines of code and algorithms. But when she pushed the door open that morning, Lucas was already there, standing in front of her whiteboard filled with complex diagrams and AI learning flows, studying her work like he owned it. "Morning, sis," he said casually, as if nothing had happened the night before, as if he hadn't stolen 2 years of her life and stood on stage taking a bow for her achievements. "Just checking in on our engine. Thought I'd take a closer look now that it's, well, the future of the company." Emma's jaw tightened. "Funny," she said evenly, setting her laptop bag on the table. "I don't remember you ever showing interest in the engine until it started making headlines." Lucas turned to face her, smile unwavering but his eyes sharp. "Come on, Emma, don't be like that. Last night was about optics. You know how Dad is, the company needs a strong public face. Investors want to see leadership. And that's you?" she shot back, her voice rising slightly despite her efforts to stay calm. "You, who didn't write a single line of code, who didn't even believe in Ether until I forced you to look at it." Lucas's smile faded just a fraction. "Look, I'm not here to argue. What's done is done, and for what it's worth, Dad and I think you've earned a bigger role. You're being promoted, Chief Technology Officer. CTO. Nice title, right? Big raise, recognition." Emma stared at him, stunned for a moment. "CTO? So I get a title to make me feel important while you keep running the show and taking credit?" Lucas folded his arms, growing impatient. "Emma, you built this as an employee. You were on payroll. This engine belongs to the company, to Dad. That's how this works." Emma's hands curled into fists at her sides. "No, Lucas, that's not how this works. You and Dad never asked how I built Ether. Did you? Whether I used company resources, whether it was done on company time. You never asked, because you never cared." Lucas blinked, clearly thrown off by her sudden intensity. "What are you talking about?" Emma reached into her bag and pulled out a slim folder, sliding it across the table. Every line of code, every AI model, every development milestone, all documented, time-stamped, and copyrighted in my name. Done on my personal time. With my own equipment. I own Ether. Lucas, not Reyes Interactive, not you, me. Lucas snatched up the folder, quickly flipping through the papers, his brow furrowing deeper with every page. "You've got to be kidding," he muttered. "I'm not," Emma said quietly but firmly. "And unless you and Dad want to see what happens when I pull the license, you're going to stop pretending that engine belongs to you. I gave this family a way to survive. I built the future of Reyes Interactive. And you two think you can throw me a fancy title and a paycheck and keep me in the shadows? Not anymore." For a long moment, Lucas said nothing, scanning through the documents, his jaw tight. Finally, he looked up at her, eyes sharp with calculation. "You're playing a dangerous game, Emma." Emma stared back, unflinching. "No, Lucas, I'm finally playing to win." The tension in the boardroom was suffocating. Floor-to-ceiling windows flooded the room with sharp morning light, casting long shadows over the polished oak table where Victor Reyes sat at the head, flanked by Lucas on his right, their usual position of authority. The entire Reyes Interactive board was assembled, a mix of investors, family friends, and executives who had watched the company rise, fall, and now, thanks to Emma, rise again. Today, however, Emma wasn't sitting quietly along the wall as she had for years. scribbling notes no one read. Today, she walked in beside her attorney, Natalie Chen, who radiated calm but carried a leather portfolio like it was a weapon. The room fell into an uneasy silence as heads turned toward Emma. Some faces confused, others already guessing something was coming. Victor gave a tight, polite smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Emma," he said coolly, glancing at Natalie, "I wasn't aware you'd be bringing guests to this meeting. Care to explain?" Emma's heart pounded, but her voice came out steady. "I think it's time we talked about the future of Reyes Interactive, and who actually owns the technology making that future possible." Lucas leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "Emma, don't start this again. You've already been offered CTO. You want more money? A bigger bonus? Just say what you want." Natalie's calm, clipped voice broke in before Emma could answer. "This isn't about a title or bonus, Mr. Reyes. This is about intellectual property ownership and licensing rights." A ripple of murmurs moved through the boardroom. Marcus Delgado, one of the few board members who truly understood tech, sat straighter, watching Emma carefully. Victor's smile vanished. "What are you talking about?" Natalie opened her portfolio and began distributing copies of a thick document to each board member. "What I'm talking about, Mr. Reyes, is that the AI gaming engine currently driving Reyes Interactive's comeback, known publicly as Project Nexus, but privately developed as Ether, is solely owned and copyrighted by Ms. Emma Reyes. All development logs, code repositories, and timestamps clearly demonstrate that Ms. Reyes created this system independently, outside her role as an employee, using her own equipment and on her own time." A stunned silence fell over the room. Emma watched as Lucas's face drained of color, and Victor's hand clenched on the table's edge. "This is absurd," Victor said sharply, his voice laced with anger. "She works for the company. Anything she makes is company property. It's basic contract law." Natalie didn't flinch. Ordinarily, that would be true if the work was performed under her official job description, using company resources, and on company time. But as you'll see in these documents, Ms. Reyes developed Ether well beyond the scope of her employment as an IT systems specialist, a role focused on technical support, not AI game engine design. Furthermore, the majority of her work was done on her own personal time, using her private equipment, which Ms. Reyes paid for herself. She even registered copyrights months before Ether was introduced to Reyes Interactive. Marcus Delgado flipped through the packet, his eyebrows rising. "These timestamps and code commits are airtight," he murmured, glancing at Emma with new respect. "This is serious." Victor's jaw tightened. "What exactly are you trying to do, Emma? Hold the company hostage? Threaten to pull the tech and tank us all? Because let me remind you, if Reyes Interactive goes under, you go with it." Emma's eyes met her father's, her calm belying the storm inside. "I don't want to destroy the company, Dad. I want recognition and control over the technology I created. You and Lucas built a career on creating worlds for players to explore. I built the world that's saving this company. I'm not going to let you cut me out of the future I built for you." Lucas slammed his hand on the table. "You're trying to hijack our family business." Emma didn't even blink. "No, I'm trying to take back what's mine, and protect it from being exploited without my consent." Natalie spoke again, her voice razor sharp. "Ms. Reyes is prepared to license the Ether platform to Reyes Interactive, under a fair and structured agreement, one that acknowledges her ownership and grants her equal decision-making power over its future development and use." Victor snorted. "So you want to be CEO now? Is that it? You think you can run this company?" Before Emma could answer, Marcus leaned forward, speaking directly to Victor. "Maybe she should." The room froze. "You've all seen what Ether has done. Without it, Reyes Interactive would be a footnote in gaming history. Emma has vision. She saw where the industry was going, and she built the tech to take us there. Frankly, I think she's earned a seat at the top, if not the seat." Several other board members nodded, some hesitantly, others more firmly. Victor stared at them, betrayal and disbelief written all over his face. "You'd let her blow up everything we've built for some legal technicality?" "It's not a technicality," Marcus shot back. "It's ownership, innovation, survival. You should have seen this coming." Emma took a deep breath. Her moment to lay everything bare. I'm not asking for a fight. But I will have one if I must. Either we restructure the company to reflect my ownership of Ether, with me as an equal leader and decision maker, or I'll pull the license and take my tech elsewhere. I've already had offers. That last line hit like a bomb. The board members began whispering urgently among themselves. Without Ether, Reyes Interactive would collapse, the deals, the investors, the future, gone. Victor leaned back in his chair, his face unreadable, but Emma could see it in his eyes, the realization that he had underestimated her. And the company was now on the edge of a precipice. Finally, he spoke, voice tight. We'll need time to review this. 24 hours, then we'll reconvene. Emma gave a short nod. You have 24 hours. After that, I move forward with or without Reyes Interactive. As she gathered her documents and walked out of the boardroom, Natalie by her side, Emma felt a surge of power she had never known, the quiet, unstoppable power of someone who finally knew her worth and wasn't afraid to claim it. Victor's office was a stark contrast to the glass and steel modernism of the rest of Reyes Interactive, a space that still clung to the past. With dark wood paneling, shelves of gaming awards, and photos of Victor and Lucas shaking hands with investors or accepting trophies. Yet, not a single picture of Emma. She stood just inside the door, heart pounding, as Victor paced behind his massive desk, hands shoved deep into his pockets, tension radiating from every step. Finally, he stopped, fixing her with a stare that was harder to endure than all the boardroom glares combined. Close the door, he said curtly. She obeyed, but didn't sit when he gestured to a chair. She didn't want to sit, she wanted answers. Victor let out a sharp exhale and turned to face the window, watching the Los Angeles skyline as if seeking escape in its distant sprawl. What are you doing, Emma? You realize what you've set in motion? This isn't just business, this is family, he said, his voice low but edged with frustration. Emma's jaw tightened. Funny, Dad. It never felt like family when you and Lucas stood on that stage last night and took credit for my work. For 2 years, I poured everything into Ether, into saving this company, into saving your name, and you didn't even mention me. Not once. Victor turned, his brow furrowed, eyes dark with something between anger and regret. You think this is easy? You think I wanted it to be like this? He shook his head. Emma, this company, our family's name, has been on the brink of collapse for years. You think I could afford to put my faith in untested tech from someone who, he stopped short. But the meaning hung heavy in the air. Emma took a step closer, her voice sharp. From someone like me? Say it, Dad. From me, the daughter you never believed in. The daughter who was good enough to fix the company's broken servers but not good enough to sit in a boardroom. Victor's face darkened. I didn't mean it like that, he said, though even he didn't sound convinced. But Emma, you're a developer. You see code. You don't see people. You don't know how to handle investors, manage egos, lead. Emma's throat tightened, but she forced herself to hold his gaze. You think I don't know how to lead? I led myself through 2 years of development while you and Lucas ignored me. I led your company out of bankruptcy when no one else had a solution. And what did you do? You gave Lucas a bonus and offered me a title to shut me up. Victor sank into his chair, rubbing a hand over his face. You have no idea what I've sacrificed to keep this company alive. Emma, there were nights I didn't know how I'd make payroll. I took loans, sold property, mortgaged everything I had, and then, when it was falling apart, Lucas was the one who stood by me, facing the board, taking the heat. He's always been there. Where were you? Emma's chest ached. I was in my apartment, building the one thing that could save us. While you were too blind to see me, I was there. Dad, I've always been there, you just didn't look. Victor looked away, guilt flickering across his face. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Finally, he sighed. You were right. You know, he said quietly, about the tech, about the future. Ether, or whatever you call it, it's brilliant. And we wouldn't be here without it. Without you. Emma swallowed hard, a mix of anger and sadness swirling inside her. Then why did it take all this for you to say that? Victor stood slowly, walking around the desk to stand closer to her. His voice softer now. Because I was afraid, he admitted. Afraid that if we put everything on your shoulders and it failed, We'd lose it all. Afraid of trusting someone, I didn't understand. But I see now. I see I was wrong. Emma blinked, caught off guard by the rare admission. So what now? She asked. Her voice quiet but firm. Victor's gaze met hers, tired but more honest than she had ever seen. Now, he said, we figure out a way forward. Together, if you'll still have us. Emma hesitated, her heart still bruised but recognizing the opening he was offering. That depends, she said, squaring her shoulders, on whether you're ready to treat me like an equal, like a partner. Victor nodded slowly. Maybe it's time we let the next generation lead. For the first time in a long time, Emma allowed herself a small smile. Good, because whether you're ready or not, I'm not stepping aside. The atmosphere in the boardroom felt heavier than the day before, as though everyone present knew they were about to witness the end of an era, or the beginning of a new one. Victor Reyes sat at the head of the table again, but this time his posture lacked the rigid authority of the past. He looked tired, contemplative. Lucas, on the other hand, wore a stiff mask of anger, arms crossed as he glared at Emma, who now sat confidently with Natalie Chen to her right and Marcus Delgado just a few seats down, giving her an encouraging nod. This was Emma's moment, and everyone knew it. Victor cleared his throat to begin. After careful consideration, and in the interest of preserving the company our family built, I've come to propose a solution that I believe benefits all parties. His eyes flickered toward Emma briefly, but there was no hostility this time, only reluctant acceptance. He gestured toward the company's general counsel, who handed out neatly bound proposals to the board members. We propose a restructuring, Victor continued, effective immediately. Reyes Interactive will spin off a new, fully owned subsidiary, Reyes Tech Gaming, focused exclusively on developing and licensing the Ether engine. This entity will be led by Emma Reyes as its CEO. The room rippled with whispers and exchanged glances. Even though they had expected something along these lines, hearing Victor say it aloud was seismic. Victor pushed on. This arrangement will allow Reyes Interactive to continue using Ether under a licensing agreement, while Emma leads her own team to pursue broader industry opportunities. Both companies remain under the Reyes family umbrella, keeping the name intact, but operating independently in their respective areas. Emma leaned forward, her voice calm but firm. I appreciate the gesture, Dad, but let me be clear, I've reviewed this proposal. And while it's a step in the right direction, there are some critical adjustments needed. Victor's brow furrowed, but he said nothing, motioning for her to continue. Emma held up her own document, a refined version of the restructuring plan, and handed copies to the board members via Natalie. First, she said, while I agree that Reyes Tech Gaming will license Ether to Reyes Interactive, I will retain full ownership of the intellectual property, and my company will be free to license it to other studios as well. No exclusivity. Lucas bristled, about to speak, but Victor raised a hand to silence him. Second, Emma continued, her eyes sharp. Reyes Tech Gaming will have its own board of directors, composed of independent tech experts and investors, not just family members or current Reyes Interactive board members. This ensures that the future of Ether is driven by people who understand the technology and the market. Marcus smirked approvingly, already flipping through the new document. Third, Emma said, her voice steady but with an edge of finality. Since I am relinquishing Ether's exclusive use to Reyes Interactive, the licensing fee will be set at market rates, no family discounts. If you want to use my technology, you'll pay what any other studio would. And finally, she looked directly at Victor and Lucas. I want public acknowledgement of my role in Ether's creation, in writing. In every official statement and publication from this company moving forward. For a long moment, the room was silent, save for the soft turning of pages. Then Victor sighed, rubbing a hand over his face, visibly weighing his options. That's a lot, he said finally, voice low. It's fair, Marcus cut in. Frankly, it's more than fair. Without Ether, you have no product, no future. You should be grateful she's even offering a license instead of walking away and taking it to your competitors. Lucas shot Marcus a glare but said nothing. Victor looked around at the board, reading the room, seeing the nods of agreement and the calculating eyes of those who knew the company couldn't afford to lose Emma or Ether. He turned back to Emma, some of the old fire returning to his gaze. If we agree to this, you'll stay on? You'll lead Reyes Tech Gaming without tearing this family apart? Emma met his gaze, her expression softening slightly. I never wanted to tear the family apart, Dad. I just wanted what was mine, and to be treated like I mattered. If you agree to this deal, I'll stay, but I won't be a silent partner. Not anymore. Victor was silent for a long beat before he finally nodded. Fine, you've got a deal. The board members murmured among themselves. But the decision was made. The vote, when it was called, was nearly unanimous, with even the family's closest allies realizing that Emma was now the company's future. As Natalie gathered the signed papers and the meeting came to a close, Victor stood slowly, walking over to Emma. You fought hard, he said quietly, something almost like respect in his voice. Your mother would have been proud. Emma's throat tightened at the unexpected mention of her mother, who had always believed in her, even when no one else had. She nodded, her voice steady. Thank you. I think she would have wanted this too. Victor gave her a faint smile before walking out with Lucas trailing behind. Silent and fuming, as Emma gathered her things, Marcus approached, smiling broadly. Congratulations, Emma. You didn't just win, you built something bigger than this company ever imagined. Emma smiled, a quiet satisfaction settling over her. Thanks, Marcus. Now let's see what happens when I'm finally in charge of my own future. 6 months later, Emma stood on a stage, bathed in bright lights, staring out at a sea of faces, investors, developers, industry leaders, gathered in one of Los Angeles' largest tech expos, where she was about to accept the Innovator of the Year award for Ether, now recognized as one of the most transformative AI gaming platforms in the industry. Clad in a sleek, sharp-cut black suit, a far cry from the girl in a simple dress hiding at the back of the room months ago, Emma felt the weight of everything it had taken to get here. The applause was deafening, rising in waves as her name was announced. And for the first time, it wasn't for Lucas, or Victor, or anyone else, it was for her. As she walked to the podium, Emma caught sight of her father sitting at one of the front tables. His expression complicated, a mixture of pride, regret, and something like awe. Lucas sat beside him, clapping politely but stiffly, unable to hide the bitterness in his eyes. Taking a deep breath, Emma faced the microphone, her voice calm but resolute as she began. When I started building Ether, I wasn't thinking about awards or accolades, she said, her gaze sweeping the crowd. I was thinking about what gaming could be if we let it evolve, if we trusted technology to create worlds as alive as the people who play them. But along the way, I learned something even harder than building the tech. I learned that sometimes the fight for what you've created is the hardest one of all. A quiet murmur of acknowledgement rippled through the crowd. Pausing, Emma let her eyes rest on Victor for a moment. Tonight isn't just about innovation, it's about finding your voice when others would rather silence it. And having the courage to claim what's yours. As the room erupted in another round of applause, Emma smiled, realizing that this victory was so much more than an award. It was a declaration that she had stepped out of the shadows, taken control of her future, and reshaped not only her family's legacy, but her own. And as she walked off stage, head held high, she knew deep down, this was only the beginning. The story of Emma Reyes teaches a powerful lesson about standing up for yourself and claiming ownership of your work, even when undervalued or overlooked by family and colleagues. Emma's courage to assert her rights and demand recognition transformed her from a background figure into a respected leader. It shows that true innovation requires not only creativity but also the bravery to fight for what you've built. Ultimately, the story reminds us that knowing your worth, standing firm against injustice, and refusing to be silenced can open doors to success and self-respect that no one else can give you.